Most conversations about Jammu and Kashmir start with a map. They center on territorial lines, military presence, and decades of intense geopolitical maneuvering. But treating this region strictly as a headline ignores the reality on the ground. This valley, ringed by snow-capped peaks and carved by winding rivers, is one of the most culturally complex ecosystems on the planet. For centuries, those massive mountain ranges acted as a physical fortress. The extreme topography shielded the local population from constant external conquest, giving them the breathing room to develop highly distinct internal traditions. If you peel away the political maps and the boundary disputes, what actually drives the daily rhythm of this region? How did this isolated valley become a cultural melting pot for half of Asia? To understand the place often called the Crown of India, we have to look past the contested territories. The real story lies in the everyday lives, the physical survival, and the enduring faith of the people who actually call it home. The journey north from the solid, rolling plains of Jammu brings a sharp environmental shift. The terrain drops into a massive basin dominated by water, transforming into the emerald valleys of Kashmir. In Srinagar, water is the foundation of daily life. Dal Lake operates as the central, life-sustaining artery for local civilization, enclosed entirely by the surrounding mountains, necessitating intricate wooden houseboats and shikaras for basic mobility. Living here required a total architectural adaptation. Entire communities are built directly on the water, utilizing carved wooden structures that serve as permanent, multi-generational homes anchored to the lakebed. Even agriculture had to bend to the aquatic environment. Farmers cultivated floating gardens, harvesting specialized fresh crops to trade at water-bound vegetable markets before dawn. These floating markets and wooden homes are the result of a society that recognized the sheer force of its environment. They engineered their entire existence around the water, rather than trying to pave over it. Because Kashmir sat adjacent to the ancient Silk Road arteries, its geographic isolation was consistently punctured by merchants and mystics. Over centuries, philosophies and people from Central Asia, Persia, and mainland India all converged directly in this valley. Later, Mughal emperors left a massive aesthetic footprint. They designed expansive stone gardens with strict geometric symmetry, attempting to build a literal Persian paradise right against the backdrop of the wild mountains. This cross-pollination generated unique religious movements. The deep meditative practices of Kashmir Shaivism met the poetic mysticism of arriving Sufi saints, creating a localized culture of spiritual coexistence. That devotion physically shapes the landscape today. Massive Hindu pilgrimage sites operate year-round, with sprawling complexes built directly into the steep mountainsides, drawing millions of visitors into the local economy. Further north, the terrain itself tests that devotion. Pilgrims endure extreme high-altitude conditions, trekking and camping across harsh snowfields to reach the gaping entrance of the Amarnath cave. Look closely at the demographics and the architecture, and you see a region reliant on a long history of shared physical endurance and quiet spiritual exchange. That historical cross-pollination is also physically preserved by the region's artisans. The skills practiced today reflect centuries of foreign influence adapted to local materials. You can see it in the highly specialized handloom process. Artisans manipulate the delicate threads of raw, high-altitude goat wool to weave intricate pashmina fabric, a highly technical process refined over hundreds of years. The same principle applies to local woodworking and papier-mâché. The vibrant aesthetics and geometric patterns originated in Central Asia, but local craftsmen applied those exact techniques to the region's abundant walnut trees. Authentic Kashmiri walnut carving requires extreme three-dimensional depth, featuring high-relief motifs of lions, local fauna, and dense foliage carved directly into a single piece of wood. This meticulous attention to detail extends into the kitchen. Community celebrations center around the Wazwan, an elaborate multi-course feast featuring complex meat preparations that require hours of highly specialized cooking techniques to execute. Even a daily cup of kahwa tells a story. The saffron-infused green tea is brewed in a traditional, intricately engraved copper samovar, blending Mughal agricultural cash crops with a Central Asian preparation vessel. These recipes, fabrics, and carvings are the active preservation of a complex history. The population keeps these practices alive, by hand, every single day. Today, a modern economic resurgence is shifting the dynamic of the valley. Global travelers, skiers hitting the slopes of Gulmarg, and high-altitude trekkers are bringing a massive influx of new revenue to local businesses. This new infrastructure sits right alongside the ancient communities. Hotels and transit networks expand, but the traditional methods of farming, weaving, and worship operate exactly as they have for generations. This explains why the region's cultural identity has remained intact despite decades of severe geopolitical turbulence. The daily rhythms of the artisans, the local farmers, and the devout pilgrims are anchored to the land itself, rather than the political boundaries drawn over it. Empires and administrations have come and gone, but the sheer granite of the mountains continues to guard the valley, and the high-altitude lakes continue to sustain the floating communities. When you filter out the noise of border disputes, the true character of this region comes into focus. It is defined by the unyielding resilience of its people and their deep, permanent bond to the landscape.